Welcome to the People Leader Accelerator Podcast. I'm Executive Coach Jess Yuen, joined by my co-host, the co-founder and managing partner of People Leader Accelerator, Andrew Bartlow. On this show, we dive deep with business and HR leaders to uncover what really works when it comes to building high-performing organizations, navigating leadership challenges, and making better management decisions. Whether you're the first people leader at a startup or a seasoned executive at a company with scale, you'll find practical insights you can apply right away. For show notes and free bonus resources, visit peopleleaderaccelerator.com/podcast. And if you're looking for hands-on support from developing your leaders to creating a high-performance culture to hiring the right people, visit us at peopleleaderaccelerator.com. We'd love to help. Let's get into today's episode.
John Anderson, really appreciate you joining Jess and I on the People Leader Accelerator podcast. I've known you for not quite 10 years now. Would actually love for you to share a little bit more about your background currently and then prior to your search work.
Yeah, absolutely. I went to UC Santa Cruz and we had to do an internship for industrial and organizational psychology. And it really jump-started my interest and love. It was in the research and development department of human resources. So think about that, way back when. I followed a leader over to Oracle. And then, I spent 20 years in heads of HR roles at various different companies. 12, 13 years ago, my wife was like, hey, you don't seem that happy doing this anymore. It was true. And I got contacted by a company that does HR search. And I was like, wow, I never knew that was something, back then, that it was a focus area. And I jumped with both feet in, got to work from home, and I've never looked back. The biggest thing for me in making this transition was working as an operator inside of a company is much different than going out and selling and winning work and then executing on it. I started out doing mostly technology HR roles, some board work, dabbled a little bit outside of HR. And then almost 3 years ago, I joined ZRG, which was the first large scale company. I'd been at 2 HR boutiques. That's all we did was HR. We have 4 lines of business: executive search, interim. We have an embedded recruiting, another name for RPO, and then consulting, which is everything from one-on-one coaching to large-scale transformation consulting. And it's really been great to work with people who do all sorts of things in these different lines of business, but also cover every function and industry across the globe. We've been growing like crazy, so that's been a lot of fun. And I've expanded from doing technology work to spending a lot of time in private equity, different industries within private equity, which have been really fun for me to learn, and then doing fund level work in private equity as well. And so that's what I've been doing, and I love doing it.
That's fantastic. I mean, you are one of the most sought after search partners for HR executives in particular, and especially for investor-backed companies. I'm curious, what keeps you focused on this niche?
I love doing HR search work. I love working with CEOs and leadership teams to find them exactly what they're looking for and delivering on that. It's a Q&A process where you find out what they really want and what they really need and putting that together. It's a puzzle to kind of pick and probe a little bit around what's super important to them, where they'll give a little bit. But mostly, it's just so fun to know I'm talking to the right candidate right now, and this is the placement. You're changing people's lives, which is a fun thing to do. When you think about all of the things that you do in HR, a lot of it can be not so fun stuff like reorganization. Helping somebody start at a new company is just really fun work to do. And so that's what keeps me excited in doing this work.
I love it. And I'm curious, as you're talking to these CEOs and leadership teams and figuring out what are they looking for and where can they give, what do you find is maybe pretty consistent across what every HR leader needs to have? And where are the places that are more variable?
Yeah, I think the one thing that maybe is a little bit behind the curtain is that CEOs and VC firms and private equity firms are pretty specific in what they're looking for. They want somebody who's going to not only bring great HR skills and capabilities to the table, but an industry understanding and a history there as well. And then whatever particular key focus areas for the business that are happening over the next 12 to 24 months, that they have good experience in being successful at doing that. Maybe it's scaling, maybe it's mergers and acquisitions, it could be something else, but those things really matter. So oftentimes people are like, hey, I saw you were doing the search for X, I'd love to be a candidate. And I would love to make everybody a candidate too, but the CEOs are pretty focused in terms of what they're looking for. And it's a matter of going out and finding those people. And when you can't, or when they're not available, then you start to help shape what somebody might look like outside of that narrower framework. But that typically happens a little bit down the road on a search and not right at the beginning.
Here in the Bay, John, venture-backed technology was so hot for so long, like capital was freely flowing. And I'm sure you were super busy placing lots of HR people into venture-backed tech. It seems as though AI is really strong, and I'm sure there's a lot of work happening in AI companies, but in general, venture-backed tech and SaaS seems to have subsided somewhat from the heights. And at the same time, private equity seems to be rising. I'd love to hear your perspective, John, as to what differentiates commonly a really good HR person in VC versus a really good HR person in PE. Do you have a take on that?
I don't know that there's a ton that differentiates, but I think there are some things that are regularly called out in private equity that are important. One is that you hear value creation a lot. And so in doing VC work, oftentimes leaders would say, hey, I want somebody who's scaled from 200 to 500, or I want somebody who has taken a domestic company global. And private equity could really care less about that. They want to understand what those additional 300 people did for the business and how you created more value in the business with those 300 people. And so as an HR leader, being able to articulate that is really important to them. I am looking for the best athlete who can come in here and really make a difference. Somebody who's an operator who knows how to work internally and externally to bring the value to the business that maybe wasn't there before or needed to be leveraged. You're sort of a captain of a ship too. You got to navigate really well. The data focus, I think, is something that's really come sharper into view. You talked about AI. It's nice to have the AI component and it's nice to have the data. It's really most important to be able to understand what your clients are looking for from that data and how you can best serve them with it. It doesn't matter if you've got the best turnover or hiring statistics if your leadership team isn't interested in it. And I think the other thing that shifted, at least in private equity that I've seen, is that culture is more of a strategy. How is your culture pushing revenue north? And how is it making you get the best executives through the door? Those are the kinds of things on the value side that people are really wanting to see and gravitate towards. The last thing too is the board visibility of this role has gone through the roof. The board really has a high interest in talking to CHROs or CPOs, understanding leadership compensation, understanding retention, understanding talent strategy, understanding the systems that are going to enable them to maybe do more with less. And those are critical components. Not to say that we don't all have experience with this, but crisis management over the last 5 years has become a huge issue too. And so being able to have somebody who's done that and can lead a company through that is really important.
I think what I'm hearing is there's not necessarily a huge distinction in terms of what is being looked for from HR based on where the capital's coming from, whether it's VC or PE. What I am hearing, though, is that there's been a shift strongly towards more about value creation, more about return on investment, more about knowing your numbers. culture is still a factor, attraction and retention is still a big part of the work, but an HR person being able to articulate their impact upon the business is maybe at an all-time high. It's certainly in tight focus. Am I getting that right?
That's exactly right. The focus is less on the activities that you've been able to achieve and more on the impact that you've been able to make and your ability to articulate exactly what you did to create that impact.
If anyone's listening and is less familiar with PE or this term value creation, the way I think about it is like, where's the money? Are we increasing revenue? Are we having more profitability? When we think about impact in a PE sense, it often is that direct line to, and how does this affect the bottom line? How does this affect the P&L? And so just putting that out there, because I know when I first got into the business world and was hearing value creation, I was like, what kind of values? There are all these different versions of it. But I have found, at least in PE, it's like dollars or whatever currency we're in, but like, where is the money flowing and how are we making the most and best use of it?
Let me share a program that's built just for people like you. Leading people at a fast growth company is one of the hardest jobs out there. That's why we created People Leader Accelerator. It's a 16-week executive program that equips HR leaders with the tools, the frameworks, and the network to succeed. Plus, you'll join a lifetime community of alumni. Applications are open at peopleleaderaccelerator.com. And with that, let's return to today's episode. At risk of getting out over my skis, if you're thinking about the world of enterprise value, a private equity investor, typically wants to acquire controlling interest in an organization and then transact, meaning sell their interest in that organization in 3, 5, maybe 7 years. The faster you do it, the better your return is. And usually that's on a multiple of your EBITDA. Generally, it's profitability. And maybe that's 10x, maybe that's 15x, whatever it is. Profit is king. And so if you in HR are able to articulate how you're moving the revenue, how you're moving the profitability, that makes you a revenue driver. That makes you a value creator. Earlier today, I won't share the name of the company, I was talking to a 500-person PE-backed organization that has a super high in-demand certification education required role. And those jobs are taking 4+ months to fill. Every day that one of those jobs is not filled, it's about $1,000 of profitability for the organization. So if you can start to translate, we have all open jobs filled, or we've reduced from 500 open days this year to 200 open days this year. Now you're starting to talk the numbers that the investors and your C-suite really care about. John, is any of this resonating?
Yeah, no, it totally resonates. And, I recently did a search for a company. For those that don't know, multi-site healthcare is a common private equity area of investment. Think about a dental organization. Dentists like to work on people's teeth, but they don't really enjoy doing all of the back end stuff. And so there's companies that do that work. And in order to expand, being able to hire more dentists, or if it's an eye care platform, optometrists, and that is revenue. If you don't have those people working and opening up new facilities, you're not driving the revenue that you plan to do. And so the talent acquisition role and the talent strategy and the workforce planning that goes into making that real and creating the value that you're talking about is so important to the business. Having the right HR and talent acquisition people to do that is critical.
In a lot of ways, I'd argue that PE, it's actually easier because of the types of work.
Yeah.
It's easier to connect our work in HR to the value creation. In classic venture-backed SaaS tech or AI, you have an engineering team and a product team and a design team that absorbs most of the jobs. And it's a little further away. It's maybe a lot further away from direct revenue. There are a lot of advantages to working in PE in HR because you're closer to the numbers in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's no surprise too that a lot of HR leaders who are on boards often come from these complex environments where exempt and non-exempt workers are. And there's a lot of regulatory components to the work that they do. We're seeing the industrial companies make more of an impact with HR people on boards than other industries have. And it's for exactly that reason that you just said.
Fascinating. We've been talking about the sort of differences between PE and VC. I would love to move more into like the viewpoint of the candidate and how to best prepare for the process of meeting the team and finding a good fit. Where do candidates often over-index and over-prepare? And where do they under-prepare and maybe they don't know quite enough what to anticipate? What are the types of things you would encourage someone to be thinking about?
Going into an interview prepared and understanding who you're talking to, the company that you're talking about, and the role, if you've been given the position spec. One of the questions that I really don't like is, hey, what do they want out of this person in the first year? My question is like, did you read the job spec? And it tells me that they probably haven't. Going into a conversation prepared around just the basics, right? Reading the job spec, knowing who you're talking to, and asking inquisitive questions like, why is the role open? What's the real value of this change or this ad? I think is really important. Sometimes where people over-index is detailing or covering every aspect of HR and the functions that they've done. And you don't need all of that information. I'm probably talking to you because I think you're a strong candidate overall, and I want to hear the impact that you've created for the business, not necessarily all the details behind that. One of my favorite questions is asking somebody to give me just a 5-minute overview of their background so that we can dig in further. And when you're 15, 20 minutes later and that person's still talking, it's an indication of what it's going to be like in the interview. And so I think it's knowing what the people are asking from you on the other end and being able to deliver that is really important. And then I think people really want process and frameworks and what you did to impact the organization. Mm-hmm. If you can read the job spec, understand at a high level what the organization is looking to do, and be able to deliver responses to the job spec, that's music to my ears. Getting into too much detail or talking generically about culture or performance, that isn't super helpful. But if you said, listen, we had this performance system when I came in, I spent some time understanding it and then implemented this different performance system. And this has been the impact to the organization. That's great. And then if you want to bring up Glassdoor in an interview, I think know that you throw out the top, you throw out the bottom, what's in the middle, and kind of where's the meat of what people are saying. It's good to ask questions about that stuff, but typically if there's some transition happening at the company, there's a reason why. And so it's good to ask about that. So
yeah. I think what I'm hearing is, take things one step further, right? Not just why are the ratings the way they are, but let me actually do my own filtering of that. Here are the themes that I am hearing about, and let me ask an insightful question about something related to maybe a transition that's happening in the culture or even the experience. You don't need me to talk for 20 minutes ad nauseum about my experience. You want me to help translate. What is it I think you're looking for based off the job description and what I understand about the business in the industry that we're in? And how do my experiences apply to this organization at this point in time and would help bring in impact? I think in general, that's such great advice in terms of like take things a step further. And maybe one anecdote I'll share from my own experience when I was interviewing as a CPO is I would ask questions about the business, look at the industry, understand what's the business model. And so just being thoughtful. I mean, now it's like a minute. You can put into any of these AI things and like, tell me about this company and this industry, and I'll summarize it for you. But like taking the minute to even ask about it and get that download, it sounds like it could be a real advantage for many candidates.
The AI piece is so important because you can say, listen, I'm interviewing with Andrew Bartlow. He's the CEO of X company. It's for a CHRO role. What questions should I ask him? Or I'm interviewing with the search partner, and it will give you back very detailed questions that you can ask. And then I think for yourself, you just want to have an executive point of view and talk more about the enterprise than the function. And, you hit that like, hey, what are you trying to do here? Or what happened at this inflection point? Those are great questions. And I love getting them as a search partner, especially when I don't know the answer. I'm like, I don't know the answer to that, but I will find out and get back to you. And And I love that. And candidates love it too. It's a way to track down information that's important to them. And it's important to me during the search. Not every question comes up during the Q&A process. So
I'd love to ask a follow-up on this. And in part because, John, I think that what you're sharing aligns so closely with the ethos of People Leader Accelerator, which is we want to help HR leaders be more successful, be more strategic, which largely means being closer to the business and understanding what your organization needs and then wrapping your work around that. I guess my question is this recent? Is this a short-term thing? Is this passing? Are we just in a moment where this proximity to the business is something that might be at a peak and we'll go back to being all about culture and all about ENPS in the future? What do you think?
the genie's out of the bottle. And I don't know that it's ever going to go back in. Jess, we talked about this years ago about people coming into the function from outside of HR. We saw all of the FANG stocks do that at their companies, some to greater success than others. I think where it worked really well is where people came in from inside the business and transitioned functions versus doing both, coming from the outside and transitioning functions. But the strategy of this role and the cost of people in your business, attracting and hiring them, of developing them, of beating your competitors at whatever they're trying to do is so critical that having somebody in this role that knows how to put together an outstanding workforce plan, who can put together great performance systems, who thinks AI first in a lot of the initiatives that they're carrying out, has that operating tension with the leadership team where they can push back, are respected, and can continue to push in areas that they feel really strongly about because they built that trust over time and the leadership team values what they have to say. I think we're here to stay on that. And you'll see the people that are moving into this role and into this function are just incredible leaders. I'm so excited to see where it's going, but I don't think it's going backwards.
I love that we're in a moment where it's like more business savvy leaders, better people leaders who can be thought partners and guides and coaches to the leadership team. Really exciting times that the bar is raising in the best of ways for this function. For someone who's never been through an executive search before or a, HR executive search, can you walk us through the typical steps of an HR search from kickoff to placement?
Typically, what happens is we will pitch, you compete against a few other firms. If you win the search, then you have a kickoff call. And during that kickoff call, you're reviewing the job spec. You probably have one that's going back and forth. You are getting questions about what's important to the CEO or the interview team. Maybe it's the private equity firm. And we will come prepared with a search strategy. And that search strategy is typically what industries are we going to focus on? What companies are we going to focus on? What titles will we focus on and locations? And we'll pressure test that with the business. And typically there's some tweaks here and there. And from there, we go to market. We have a job description that's finalized. We can share that with candidates. So we'll go to market. And a lot of times what I'll do too is I will share my go-to-market pitch with clients to say, hey, this is what I'm sending out to clients. Getting that buy-in is just nice. Clients feel like, okay, great. I feel good about what's going out to prospective candidates. I feel good that they're on board with what I'm saying. And then we will have a 2-week period where we're going out, talking to people, refining that, and we'll come back and have what we call a calibration meeting. And we will calibrate and pressure test those candidates that we have talked to or we're targeting in the market. And we'll get feedback from the client around yes, or tweak a little bit here. It's a weekly cadence of meeting with our client and going through who we have in the pipeline in the process. There's typically not major tweaks that happen, but sometimes there are slight tweaks like, A client may fall in love with a candidate that's not in market, and so they stretch a little bit. That may happen on the compensation side too. And the process from there will go through each of the interviewers. We define our skills and attributes for every search. You could do 15 CHRO searches in a year, but the skills and attributes are going to be different for everyone. There may be some similarities across, but typically they're different. So we score candidates against those. And then at the end of the process, we take people through our Taylor assessment, which is a 30-minute assessment based on business behaviors that we get a baseline from the company when we kick off the search. And then we take the top 2 or 3 candidates at the end of the search through the Taylor assessment to see how they align with the way that the company likes to work. If speed is something that's really important to the business, but it's not important to the candidate, you're going to have some rubs. Once we start to get down to our top candidate, I will call people like you or Andrew and say, hey, Andrew, I know you know Jess really well. Can you tell me a little bit more about her? I know back channels can be a very controversial topic. I try to get information that is going to be helpful to that individual and to the search. And my goal is to make sure this is the right long-term fit, not to get the hire done. That never serves me well. And so I really want to ensure, is this the right long-term fit? And I will typically ask candidates on the front end, do you mind if I reach out to some people I know that also know you and find out a bit more about you? I've never had somebody say no. And so that process is happening, and then we'll go into offer negotiation. And typically that's not too controversial. You have a very strong idea on what your client wants to do, and you have a very strong idea of where your candidate wants to be. And it's really about making sure that you get the things at the margins right so that you're ready to move forward. And then it's presenting the offer, formally checking references, and having them start. That's the sort of detailed high level.
That's great. Well, thanks for the peek behind the curtain as to how the search takes place from the search firm's perspective and from the hiring organization's perspective. I guess thinking about our audience, which will tend to be mid to senior HR leaders, often, head of the function. If you are thinking about the next rung on the career ladder, or maybe you're actively employed, but you want to think about the next great opportunity, what's the best way to position yourself to be found by someone like you and to be a great candidate for the next great opportunity? What should candidates do?
I'm reminded of a woman by the name of Kathy Zwickert, who started out in finance, moved into HR, and then did board work. And one of the things that Kathy told me, that as a emerging candidate who wanted to be in the C-suite at some point, there's never a phone call that she wouldn't take. She said, look, I learned something from every phone call. I may not be interested. I may know somebody who is. I think of this as a network, and I would not be sitting in the board seat that I'm sitting in today had I not taken a call about a job that I knew I didn't want. She went into that meeting knowing full well she wasn't going to take the job, but she did say at the end, hey, if you ever happen to have a board seat open, I would be really interested in that. And the CEO said, I actually have somebody retiring. They hit it off so well, boom, it was done. So I think that's the most important thing, is being open-minded. Number 2 is, don't underestimate the value that you can get and the experience that you can get in the company that you're already at. Moving every 2 years and going to do something new, you can show some real progression in doing that, but you also may miss out on going deep in some areas that are going to be really helpful for you. Organizational development as an example, performance as an example, seeing those cycles over a period of time. So I would say don't underestimate that. Just like not taking a phone call, if you get the opportunity to be on a cross-functional team, an HR team that's working on a key project, take it. You're going to learn so much. The more of those cycles that you have, the more interesting you become as a candidate, because you have those things that the client is looking for on your resume. And then Don't be shy about connecting with a leadership team member that you really look up to. Ask them to be your mentor. Ask if you can sit in on their meetings. Whatever extra time you have that you can engage yourself at a higher level prepares you to get to that next level. So I would say take advantage of those opportunities too. And then there's, things like PLA that you can do, People Tech Partners, all of those things really help you build out your skill set.
Excellent advice. And I'm curious, I sometimes get asked by folks who are advancing in their career, should I go get a certification? Should I go back to school? Should I get an MBA to show that I'm business oriented? What's your take on advanced degrees and certifications in this market?
I have differing views on certifications and degrees. I think an MBA can be enormously helpful to an individual or a candidate. Do you have to have it? No, you don't have to have it, but I think it's a really valuable thing to have. Certifications, unless that certification is something where you got some real world experience in doing it, a higher level internship, if you will. I think the best experience any candidate can get is doing the work and understanding the culture and the dynamics that happen.
Let's continue on the learning path. And John, let's also shift into what we call our accelerator round. From your perspective as a search expert, mostly for HR roles, and then a longtime HR leader at the highest levels, what are the sources that you could recommend that our listeners should tune into to support their learning?
There's an individual by the name of Tom Black, who's a famous sales individual. And Tom has a terrific sales book that I would recommend to everybody. I guess I'm mostly a podcast listener. And so private equity podcasts are really interesting to me too. And just understanding what's happening on the world on the other side. Venture is the same thing. One of my favorite go-tos is the Kleiner Perkins Grit podcast.
How about thinking about the audience, again, mid to senior level HR leaders? If those folks were to ask you directly, John, what advice do you have for us about how to accelerate our HR careers? What could you share?
The People Leader Accelerator, great program for them. I do think learning amongst your peers outside of your workplace is a really valuable thing to do because you get to trade and exchange ideas around what's happening where you are, but also incorporating what other people are doing in their businesses. It's a safe place too to open up about where you might be having challenges, whether it's on a promotion or it's a relationship. I think those are great opportunities to have. Networks have become so important to all of us, whether you're in marketing or you're in people operations. Having people who do what you do, but maybe in a different industry or at a different level that you can tap into is such a great way to grow your career. One of the things that I found getting into private equity more is how sophisticated industrial companies are around HR. And that's not something that I would have ever thought about before spending more time with these people and these companies. But now that I have, I'm like, wow, this is really impressive to see the work that they do. And so combining different industries, whether it's industrial or technology or something else, is a great opportunity.
Last accelerator round question, John. How can our listeners connect with you?
Yeah, they can easily find me on our website, zrgpartners.com. And it's just Jay Anderson at zrgpartners.com. They can find me on the People Tech Partners website. Those are probably the two best places to find me.
Wonderful. John, thank you so much for joining us today on the PLA podcast. It is a pleasure always to chat, and we're so excited that you could share some of your experiences and pieces of wisdom with our audience.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of People Leader Accelerator Podcast, where we talk with business and HR leaders about what makes great leadership and great work. We hope you walked away with at least one game-changing insight for you and your team. You can find show notes and free bonus resources at peopleleaderaccelerator.com/podcast. If today's conversation sparked something for you, hit subscribe, leave a quick review, and share this episode with that one colleague who really needs to hear it. You know who I'm talking about. And if you're currently navigating the tricky waters of hiring top talent, developing leaders who actually lead, or building a culture that fuels growth, let's talk. You can find us at peopleleaderaccelerator.com. We're here to help you and your team not just survive, but truly thrive. I'm Jess Yuen, and on behalf of my co-host, Andrew Bartlow, thanks for investing your valuable time with us. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. Until next time, keep learning and keep leading.